I cannot read. And whoa.
Let's say a very good morning to the Sun's deputy political editor, legendary Ryan Sabey. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Jeremy.
It's all good on here, mate. Did you see that Lisa Nandy speech? If it walks like a duck and looks like a duck, it is a duck.
Yeah, no, she was. I think it's something she said last week, and obviously she got pressed on it yesterday, and it's created a bit of a row because obviously Reform have hit back, but also doesn't play particularly well with some people who are maybe in her constituency who are thinking of switching to Reform, who are probably in that sort of position and think, well, are you labelling the party? Are you labelling me for having?
And also, Ryan, let's get serious. What is it? Not duckist? How do you think ducks feel? I mean, it might not be fascist. It's anti-duck, I think. I mean, it's disgraceful. Listen, they're a bunch of idiots. Do you have any inside knowledge on what the 9 o'clock Keir Starmer talking to the nation is, my friend?
Yeah, what I'm expecting is Keir Starmer to lay out sort of pretty on the line about what's happening with Greenland. Now, I think Keir Starmer he's always in a tricky position, but I think he's in a particularly tricky position on this when it comes to diplomacy, because on the one hand, he's got to stick with his European allies when it comes to Greenland, and on the other hand, he's got to not be too aggressive to wind up Donald Trump over what he's doing. But what Donald Trump has done, not only over Greenland, but the threat of imposing tariffs, really puts Keir in a real dilemma over this. So I expect him to go pretty hard on Donald Trump, but not go so far as to really, really antagonize. I expect it to be a really, really forceful message. And I think one thing that you all see, we talk about never hear Keir, always on the world stage, always traveling all over the place. So I think this is going to be the moment where he can say, look, I travel around the world, I travel to America, I speak to Donald Trump. And because we are close allies, because we are friends, I can tell them some hard truths. And I think it's going to be that kind of message that we're going to get across this morning.
I think it's really interesting because you say that he's, and this isn't flippant, you say that he's in a difficult position. We were playing footage there of the first time he met Trump, and Trump's holding a file and some papers drop out of it, and Starmer flings himself to his knees and picks up the paper while Trump just looks down at him. I understand this special relationship more than people know, but I'm sure that Trump knows he's got Starmer by the short and curlies, and I'm sure it is difficult for him to say today, no, you can't do that. But stand with your allies. This 81 billion trade tariff that the European Union could tally against, they won't do that. And I keep going back in my head to when he first got into the White House, he was hacked off naturally, I think, about how much people were paying into NATO. They were paying far more in defending Europe. And he postured and everybody put their hands in their pockets. And I just hope, but I could be wrong, that this is the same thing. He's a deal maker, but he stands up to everybody. But I don't see a raft of politicians, starting with Starmer, that have the cojones to do that, pal.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one thing, as you say there about Donald Trump, this is a starting position. He is a deal maker. He is a negotiator. Yeah. And I think this is where he comes from. I think there was in one of his social media messages over the weekend saying this is his opening position. Now, I think that's exactly where we are. And what he'll do is he'll try and get, maybe in a few weeks or even this week, when they all meet in Davos. Donald Trump was meant to be going to Davos this week. That's
is it this week? Is it to Davos? Just when the millions of them get in their gas-guzzling jets and fly to the Brazilian rainforest to talk about net zero, yeah?
Never pay for Wi-Fi again. InstaBridge is a free app with 20 million Wi-Fi passwords.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is getting ready to hold a news conference. This comes after Starmer told President Trump on Sunday he's wrong for targeting Britain and fellow NATO allies with tariffs. Let's listen together.
And so any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. That right is fundamental, and we support it. Denmark is a close ally of the United Kingdom and of the United States, a proud NATO member that has stood shoulder to shoulder with us, including at real human cost in recent decades. Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It is not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance. Nor is it helpful to frame efforts to strengthen Greenland's security as a justification for economic pressure.
We've just been listening to British Prime Minister there, Keir Starmer. He spoke for a little bit more than 30 minutes or so from Downing Street. Just a few takeaways from his comments there. He said mature alliances are not about pretending differences don't exist. They're about addressing them respectfully. He later said any discussion about Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and Denmark. Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnerships, not pressure. He said Britain is a pragmatic country. We look for agreement, but being pragmatic doesn't mean being passive. However, when asked repeatedly, I would say the majority of questions from the press were about the potential for retaliatory tariffs after President Trump's threats. He sort of really shied away from that. I want to continue the conversation now and bring into the discussion, live from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Josh Lipsky, who's Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center. Josh, great to have you this morning. Before we talk about what Keir Starmer just said, I actually want to play for our audience some reporting from Reuters. This is apparently President Trump telling the Norwegian Prime Minister that he no longer feels, quote, an obligation to think about purely of peace after he did not receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Josh, your reaction to that?
Well, we are in a crisis right now, a transatlantic crisis. And I think it's important to understand why the president's social media output over the weekend set off a series of events, which you saw the prime minister just react to. There is division within Europe over how to respond. You saw the EU leaders convening yesterday to think about what kind of retaliatory measures, if any, they will threaten. You just heard from the UK, they don't want to put retaliatory measures on the table. The UK and the EU are trying not to escalate, but they're finding increasingly hard to do so. And they don't see the areas right now of off-ramps from the US side. And there's no deal space right now. It's unclear what the U.S. wants outside of getting Greenland for the U.S. That's a non-starter, as we understand completely from the UK and the EU perspective, certainly from Denmark's perspective. So this is where we are, a disagreement unlike any we've seen in the first Trump term, with him using his favorite economic tool, tariffs, just like he did in the first year of the second term.
So, Josh, if tariffs or retaliatory tariffs appear to be off the table, at least from Starmer's comments, what options does Europe have now?
Well, I think Europe is going to have a strong and unified response. We've heard that the EU is preparing a 93 billion euro package. Obviously, that will be not met well at the White House. At Bourbon and Boeing and others become right into the possibility of what is threatened right there. But I think what's important to understand from that perspective is that in this situation, Europe has tried the de-escalatory path. That hasn't worked so far. And they thought they had a deal, both the UK and the EU, only to wake up Saturday and be threatened with tariffs. And so I think you're going to see a much stronger response than you saw any time in the first year of Trump's second term.
And Josh, we can appreciate that. It's a very
If you're a UK homeowner and your current windows and doors are older than 5 years old, like this,
Prime Minister was talking about how the UK has a long history where values have not been improvised but built over time. He talked about the strong alliance between the UK and the US, a closer alliance, a relationship that's been both strong and productive, and it is approach, and that approach is delivering with growth skills across the country, and it said it is keeping Britain safe in an increasingly dangerous environment. He talked about how mature alliances are not about pretending differences do not exist, and the way to approach that is through calm discussion. He talked about how the security of Greenland matters, and how what's called the High North, which comprises Greenland, is going to require greater investment and greater attention. The UK stands ready to commit fully, he said. Any decision about the future of Greenland, about Greenland has to be for the people of Greenland and for Denmark alone. Alliances do endure. But on the subject of tariffs, he said it simply is completely wrong, his words directly. His trade war, he said, is of no one interest. Solutions are rooted in partnerships, facts and mutual respect. Pragmatic countries, they look for agreement, not being passive. That's broadly outlining what we heard. And here's the two sides of it. Greg in Harlow, what a speech from Starmer. Roll over and let Trump tickle your tummy, spineless. Meanwhile, George Thomas, solid statement. Well said, unbending, but diplomatic, quite correct, a superb job. Tony's in Willesden Green. Which is it for you, Tony? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Completely toothless speech.
Okay. What did you want him to say then?
Well, I wanted him to say that he will reciprocate with tariffs, or bring the rest of the NATO members together and threaten the US with potential economic sanctions, or talk about their treasury bonds, because you can't stand up to a bully like that with just talking about calm discussions. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Do you want a trade war? Do you not agree no one actually wins a trade war? Or do you
I agree that people don't win a trade war, but It's like being threatened with armed conflict and saying, well, let's have a chat about it. You've got to show strength in as much as you can reciprocate. I mean, we've seen Trump act in this way with other tariffs, and really he just wants to bring people to the table to have a deal. But there's nothing that says why. It's only his words saying that Greenland is important to take over by the Americans. I mean, you had the Greenlander guy just before on the radio saying they haven't seen any Chinese or Russian ships in the area. I'm not saying they don't exist, but the Greenlanders have been very open about saying expand your bases. All he's trying to do is expand territory and go down in history for expanding the size of the US. I can see the security concern, but that doesn't, he can do that simply by expanding his base and not taking over a sovereign country.
Not approval from Tony. Thank you for holding on the line, Tony. You're the first reaction on the phones. Let's get a second. Daniel in Benfleet. Pretty poor rating there from Tony. What about you, Daniel? Good morning.
Hi, Nick. Good morning. I just wanted to raise a point that the stances from a security angle on annexing Greenland, but no one's mentioning it's one of the largest deposits of rare metals used in the tech industry. And the Prime Minister's talking about growth. If America were to own that territory, how would we stand with that?
So what? Sorry. So what did you think? Sir Keir should have addressed that. Then is that what you're saying? Just to clarify.
Well, it would be a land grab, and it's very, very valuable for the rare metals to be mined. That would affect markets globally.
Again, so how should the Prime Minister have addressed that, or should he have spelt that out? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
I see. I see. So spell out. Look, this isn't about geographic strategic. This is a land grab. Is what you wanted to hear.
Yes.
From. I see. Okay, Daniel. So again, you'd say he's not gone far enough. Okay, the early reviews are in, and they're not that favourable. Graham in Newark. Graham, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, but what I want to say is that we are America's greatest ally and friend for many years. Mm-hmm. If America treats us like that, it's a huge implication on the rest of the world. It says that America treats every other country like a competitive business. And there is no friendship and there is no genuine trust. I think that's absolutely huge beyond our country for the whole of the rest of the world.
Did you get the sense that Sir Keir Starmer signified that in the speech he's just given?
No, I just think he was doing an entirely predictable speech, desperately trying to sound statesmanlike, really.
Okay. Therefore, I have to ask you, what did you want to hear?
Well, what I wanted to hear is a clear thing about saying this is a fracture of a trusted friendship when a friend becomes not a friend, and that, of course, we would have to respond in like manner for our own wealth and security. Okay. Because otherwise, what you find with a bully, it's the same as the playground, isn't it? If bullies understand power very, very, very well, and the more you give them, the more they take. It's from the playground upwards, all through life, in my opinion.
Lastly, Graham, I know you're in Newark. Are you someone who is in Robert Jenrick's constituency, or are you in a different part of the town?
No, we are. Yes, I am in Robert Jenrick's constituency.
I've got to ask you a question. Now that Mr Jenrick has decided to join Reform UK, as and when the next general election comes about, who would you vote for?
I'd vote for a politician that genuinely can get us to see our GPs.
Right.
Basically, because GPs are just 111. That's
okay. So would that be Mr Jenrick or not?
Do you know, I don't really know. He might grandstand, or he might actually be effective. Of course, the thing about Newark, well, like any constituency, is us that vote for our MPs. So our MPs need to, in some way, represent the people of their constituencies.
And did he do that by leaving Conservatives?
I don't really know.
All right. We'll have to see when it rolls around in a few years' time. Great, thank you for that. John in Glasgow, let's come back to what we heard from the Prime Minister about 25 minutes or so ago. Your take on what you made of it. Morning.
Well, you asked Nick if I wanted to hear from the Prime Minister. The answer is no. Right. What I wanted him to say, nothing. I've just listened to him on BBC Radio Scotland, where they actually faded him out, the Prime Minister, mid-flow, so they obviously came to the conclusion that it wasn't worth airtime or listening to any further. This is another fine mess he's got us into as the United Kingdom. He didn't need to sign up to any of this.
How is this Sir Keir's making, in your view, John?
Well, we're not part of the European Union. He said what he needed to say, which is that Greenland is a matter for the Greenlanders and the Danes and the Americans. If the European Union then want to row in behind Denmark, he didn't need to row in behind them as well.
But President Trump,
his German allies have already turned tail and run.
But President Trump has said anyone who is against, he will levy tariffs on anyone who's against his Trump stance on Greenland. So, I mean, he's not doing this as the European Union, he's doing this as the UK and to a degree as part of NATO, John.
Well, it's a neutral stance to say what he said at the beginning, but to end up lining us up for tariffs based on putting a soldier, an officer on the plane, and signing basically a petition alongside Germany, France, and everybody else is something he didn't actually have to do. The Germans have turned tail and run and put all the soldiers back on the plane yesterday morning, saying, "Oh, we've seen everything we need to see here. Mission accomplished. Bye bye." So his allies, he's lined himself up with his allies who've already abandoned him.
Okay. All right, John, I can hear what you say. I think you have to be aware that this is apart from the European Union. The United Kingdom will face those tariffs as the way Trump calls it, but thanks, John.
Are you looking to watch film videos? I recently come across an incredible...
So you're telling me I can straighten my teeth in as little as 4 to 6 months from just £38 a month?
You've called President Trump an idiot for his push to take control of Greenland, and you've said that Congress can't take any chances of allowing that. Week. How are they reacting to President Trump's threats?
Look, they're shocked, and they're trying to find reason within what's happening here. And I tried to explain to them there is no reasoning, right? The president just wants to have a legacy piece where he gets to claim that he brought in this big chunk of land that he sees on the map, even though it's distorted map, and he's willing to ruin our whole foreign policy, all of our alliances, our economy, just so he could get what he wants. This man is doing everything for himself and nothing for us. Even the idea of buying it. We're going to spend billions and billions of dollars, potentially $500 billion, which is never going to happen. But right now we can't even afford health insurance for U.S. citizens, and we're talking about buying land. And let me just say one more time, Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenland has said, we will give you everything you want, short of giving you possession of our land. You want more bases, you get more bases. You want to put more people, you get it. The idea that we're going to waste money for everything we want is the dumbest decision we can make. The only way we can make a decision this dumb is someone that would actually let a casino go under, and guess who's president right now?
This threat that he put out yesterday, just to remind viewers, it may not have been checking Truth Social yesterday, but a very serious threat, 10% tariffs on these European countries starting February 1st, and an additional 25% in June 1st. Elena, you cover the White House. Where's this heading? That's the question so many people have. He is not backing down despite we're seeing so much pushback in Congress, around the world, in America's closest allies. Where's he going with this?
Look, I'll say a lot of this is coming, obviously this was ratcheted up rhetoric in the days after the Venezuela operation. Yeah. The president is feeling very, very emboldened after the success of the capture of Nicolas Maduro and what they were able to do there. And that's part of what's happening behind the scenes. I'd remind you, this is something Trump has wanted for several years. He tried and failed during his first term to try and see what he could do about getting a portion of Greenland, annexing Greenland, not to this extent, but wanted to do this and was essentially told he couldn't by the people around him then. Now he is very much emboldened to trying to see what he can do here. And I will say, despite a lot of uneasiness, I'd argue, behind the scenes, even at the White House from some of his top advisors about this idea of potentially using the military to go in and try to gain control of what is a Danish territory and undermining NATO to do so. The president believes that this is a legacy building thing for him. And that's what I think a lot of this comes down to, particularly when you look at the foreign policy thing here. He believes that the Arctic region needs this type of security, not just for national security reasons because of aggression from China and Russia, but also for missile defense systems. Yeah. I'm getting in the weeds here, but I'll just say this is something he very much believes is necessary. And so the politics around it is actually almost secondary to what he believes will be a legacy building thing for him.
And natural resources, exactly. Right? I mean, he's been saying this is all about national security, but I remember when Mike Waltz was coming in as national security advisor, and he also mentioned critical minerals, right, that are under some of the ice there in Greenland as well. I think the emboldened point is absolutely right. When I saw the Truth Social post yesterday, I immediately went back to when we were in the Oval Office with him and we asked him, what can stop you on the world stage right now? What do you feel is a restraint on your power? And he said, myself. He said, my own morality. And we asked, what about international law? And he brushed that aside, essentially. I don't need international law, right? Said he would abide by it, but it depends on how you define it. That's pretty relevant when you look at these threats on Greenland, particularly after military operation in Venezuela. Absolutely emboldened right now. Absolutely.
And he's going to Davos this week. You're going to Davos this week as well. So we'll see how he addresses it, if he does address it there, and he meets with Europeans as well. But you mentioned the pushback that is happening and how Trump doesn't seem to care about that. The American public, this is what they said according to the CNN poll that came out just a couple of days ago. It said about, should the United States take control of Greenland? Not very popular there, as you can see. Only among independents, look at that, 82% of independent voters oppose. Just 52% of Republicans are in favor of it, which is not a good number for Trump, who's usually the 80s and 90s when it comes to GOP support, but significant opposition across the board there. And then on Capitol Hill, there was actually a delegation in Denmark while Trump was making this tariff threat. Tom Tillis, the Republican senator, said the fact that only a small handful of advisors are actively pushing for a course of action to seize territory of an ally is, quote, beyond stupid. And then Lisa Murkowski, another Republican, called this unnecessary, punitive, and a profound mistake. So, look, these are the people who support NATO. They support Greenland. They want to show support for Denmark. So perhaps not surprising they're saying this, but Trump doesn't seem to care about this.
I mean, these Republican senators and lots of people have wanted to pretend that this is not a real thing for a very long time, dating back to 2019 when Trump first began floating this. I think this tariff threat is the latest sign that they need to take this seriously. And those senators that believe in the importance of NATO probably need to reckon with the idea that even the things Trump is doing shy of a military invasion of Greenland could really damage that alliance over the long term. Maybe they need to do something about this because he does appear to be serious about it. So I think in the coming days, it's going to be really telling to see how some of these members talk. Do they talk like Tom Tillis talks? Do they talk like Lisa Murkowski? Do they start to talk about something we saw recently with Venezuela, which is a war powers resolution that would somehow restrict what Trump can do? Do they start talking about reining in his tariff authorities? I think it's difficult to believe they would ever do that because that would be a huge rebuke of Trump, but those are the levers that are very much available to them if they feel strongly.
Yeah, and Aaron, you actually have a good piece here about just how the GOP's non-interventionist phase is over. Because you're seeing, we're seeing not just in Greenland, but all these other, what happened to the president who was not going to be involved in rebuilding or intervening. Military restraint. And over the weekend, he also threatened Iran's supreme leader, calling him a criminal and saying that, this is called him a sick man who should run his country properly and stop killing people. He told that to Politico over the weekend. This is not a isolationist president.
No. And, I think that's a faction of his base interpreted America first to be isolationist. To me, the through line with Trump's approach on the global stage has always been transactional, right? This is the latest iteration of America first. He even had a comment of this years ago that America first is really what he makes it, right? And this period is showing that. I think you're still seeing the transactional element on the global stage. But you're right. And by the way, going back to our last block, this is also a source of frustration among some members of his base, the most outspoken ones. But I think that's a trickle down to voters, too. The focus on foreign policy and not enough on domestic issues.
Joining us now is the former Vice President of the United States, Republican Mike Pence of Indiana. I see him wearing his Hoosier tie. I assume that's a nod to Monday night's game. Mr. Vice President, we are seeing a lot of...
You better believe it.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of Republican pushback to the president's focus on Greenland and his threats yesterday to U.S. allies in terms of the tariffs. Republican Congressman Don Bacon told me yesterday in the wake of the president's new tariff threats, quote, "I and most Americans disagree with the president's heavy-handedness. He is threatening NATO members, which is shameful," unquote. Are you concerned that these actions are jeopardizing the NATO alliance?
Well, I think it's a question right now, Jake, not of what the president's trying to accomplish, but how. And I have concerns about
200 days since our last customer service meltdown.
Oh, because we're not just responding, but resolving issues faster with service.
It's quite shocking, to be honest. I mean, President Trump, leading up to the U.S. going in and capturing Maduro in Venezuela was all about, this is national security interests for the United States. This is about, protecting the U.S. This is, part of his America First strategy, even though there's still some questions there on how much is this really American First. But even for Greenland, he was making the same argument that the U.S., needed this for national security. But to see this letter and for it to be about him not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, it definitely brings questions on, okay, how much about national security is this, or how much is this just about you trying to find a way to get the Nobel Peace Prize or express your frustration for not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize? So it's definitely quite interesting that he has sort of taken this turn in the midst of everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can well imagine this is going to dominate conversation at Davos, and the timing ahead of Davos, with the world's sort of most powerful, influential people, many of whom will be in front of microphones this week, is fascinating. So tell us, Scarlett, I mean, Trump himself going to Davos, what's he hoping to achieve? Yeah, well, I mean, this is the first major gathering among the global elite, from business leaders to other country heads, and since Venezuela, and I guess the first major event of the new year, technically. But the president leading up to it has been talking about affordability, and he seems to want, it seems what we've gathered so far is during his major address, he's going to focus on housing and affordability. And back in the U.S., this is a midterm year, and for his base, for Republican voters, there is some frustration, some anxiety on his policies. I mean, from tariffs to sort of everything that he's done in his first year in office, there's a lot of questions on how are his policies translating to voters as prices in the U.S. are just skyrocketing, and affordability has definitely become, a theme that Republicans, the Trump administration, are trying to navigate to secure those votes. But I mean, it is quite interesting that he's going to lay out all of these housing policies at Davos, which is a conference for,
pretty wealthy people. So it does also raise into question how in touch is the administration in terms of connecting with voters, like in middle America, for example, who are, some might not even know what Davos is. And I think that's sort of what the administration is having to navigate right now, is how they're messaging affordability to American voters right now. But I mean, we'll see what he says, but it seems like it's going to be a lot on housing and affordability policies.